Man, that guy Joe West, man, he don't take shit from nobody. Oh, hi Joe. I was just talking highly of you. You know that, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, sure. Sure, you were talking highly of me. A guy that's living proof that birth control should be retroactive is giving me stuff like that. So you're out of here. Get out.
Are you kidding me, Joe? What the hell did I do? I was speaking highly of you. You throwing my ass out?
Yeah, you're gone.
Oh my God! What the fuck, Joe? I thought we go way back. We knew each other. Come on now.
Seeing you're using profanity loud enough for the spectators to hear, I'll be sure you get fined for that too.
Oh my God! What? Jeez. I can't hang out in the dugout.
No,
Oh, I literally have to leave the stadium. Is that what you're telling me?
that's right. Get out.
So here we have it, the man of the hour. Well, let me tell you a story about this gentleman, all right? He has been a former MLB umpire over 6 decades. That's right, 6 decades. And he retired 2 years ago, 2021. He umped the most games ever in Major League Baseball. Please welcome the legendary Joe Cowboy West in the house, baby. How are you?
Yeah, I see you've done everything right, but it says here Joe West MLB umpire on my screen, and it should say retired because
But
I'm
no,
not
no, no,
doing
no,
it
no. But hold on a
anymore.
minute. If you look under MLB 1976 to 2021,
Yeah, that's right. That was the first game I worked was in 1976. Were you even born then?
I was one.
You so so they brought me to the big leagues the last month of the season. I worked 8 games, and then they sent me to instruction league. They thought I needed more training. Anyway, so that was my first game. Was like September 14th in '76, and and I think at the time I was one of the three youngest umpires that ever worked in the big leagues. But yeah, that was exciting, and I was very lucky. I made it really early in my life, so I got to spend a lot of years in the big leagues. I wasn't full time until '78, but after that, I worked uh, right up until '99, and then we had a couple years off for union bad behavior. I think Manfred would call it. And then I won my job back going through federal court, and I worked another 22 years. In fact, John Hirschbeck asked me one day. He says, "What are you going to do?" I said, "Well, I gave him 22 of the best years of my life. Now I'm going to give him 22 of the worst." So,
When you were umpiring in the minor leagues, you had to have a part-time job, right? Another job besides just umpiring.
yeah, well, I was kind of lucky because I got sent to the fall league or the winter league every year. I worked in Puerto Rico one year, and I worked in the Florida Instruction League 3 years, and of course the fourth year I was in the big leagues. So it was uh, it was amazing because I had dropped out of college with a full scholarship to go to umpire school, and both of my parents were school teachers, and they almost disowned me when I dropped out of college. And and then 4 years later, I was making more money than both of them working in the big leagues. So I was very lucky. I was happened to be in the right place at the right time. The American League had already expanded, and the National League was trying to protect umpires because the American League had taken options out on all the senior umpires in the minor leagues. And I think the guys that I came up with, Jerry Crawford, Montague, Quick, Eric Gregg, Charlie Williams, Randy Marsh, I got put in that group of people, and that's how I went to the big leagues. So I was very lucky. I was there when the American League was trying to expand, and the National League was trying to protect minor league umpires so they'd have people to pick from. Today, with both leagues, uh, they're all under one umbrella, so that wouldn't have made any difference today. But back then, that was a big deal to be have an option taken out on you.
Joe, when you were in umpire school, right? Were you the fastest that made it to the big leagues ever? Were you that guy?
No, I think there were guys like Palermo and Jimmy Evans. Um, Montague went up pretty quick, but I was like 3.5 years in the minor leagues, and those guys were about the same. So uh, again, that's you have to be in the right place at the right time. You know.
So on the average, today, let's look at today right now, okay? How long does it take for an umpire to become a big league umpire? I mean, is it just like a minor league ball player too? Sometimes the guys stay there for 10 years.
Well, yeah, but you got to realize it's about in those 4 years I was in the minor leagues. I worked in 2 seasons every year, so the Florida Instruction League was 60 games. The Puerto Rican Winter League that was over 100 games. So working that was like having another year added. So a guy that works 8 or 9 years in the minor leagues has worked probably 14 or 15 different seasons because he's working. If he works the winter leagues, he's working 2 seasons a year. So the comparison of a guy like David Clyde went to the big leagues from high school. Bob Horner went to the big leagues from college. Those are anomalies. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen today because there's too much growing up. The best thing about Major League Baseball is the progress to get them to the big leagues where they learn how to play before they get there. The problem that happens a lot is sometimes they don't have enough time to develop before they have to promote them. And in certain cases, there was, of course, when I was coming up, they were trying to hire African American umpires. And Eric Gregg was like the third African American umpire ever. Charlie Williams was the fourth because they were getting heat, public heat from not hiring minorities. And these are two pretty good umpires, And in fact, they let Art Williams go, who was the second African American umpire, because he didn't make the grade. But these other two guys came up and they had great careers. They worked a long time, and then I happened to work with Kerwin Daly. This is a funny story because in the history of baseball, there's only been right at 400 umpires. Now think about that. Over 100 years we played baseball. Well, we've only had 400 umpires. We have 750 players every year, but there's only been 400 umpires. Now, of those 400, in the 44 years I worked in the big leagues, I worked with over 150 of them. So I've worked the gamut front to back with a lot of different umpires and all different characteristics, all different makeups. Some were mild mannered, some were fiery, some were they were as hard headed as I was. So, but the point being, because of the history of baseball, when baseball first started, there were only two umpires that worked the games, and people don't realize that. When Jackie Robinson came to the big leagues, there were only three umpires that worked the games. In the National League, they only had three umpires in Jackie Robinson's first game. So if you saw the movie 42, the only thing that was technically wrong with the movie was the number of umpires on the field. Because Jackie Robinson, until he was 5 years in the big leagues, only had three umpires at the big league level, and he only had two when he was in the minor leagues. But every scene you saw him in the baseball scenes in the movie, there were four umpires. So that wasn't accurate. Somebody didn't do their homework.
Someone, speaking of Jackie Robinson, that was my great friend. He was my next door neighbor in L.A.
Oh, good.
Chadwick.
He was a classy guy, and his wife is a sweetheart. She's such a sweetheart.
No, I'm saying the actor that played Jackie Robinson.
Oh,
the actor named Chadwick Boseman, he died. And
I didn't know that.
He was the Black Panther actor, but he played Jackie Robinson. And
he did a great job.
Yeah,
he did. That was an awesome story, and it was a great feel-good story too, because they were held back so badly. It was terrible.
I think Reggie Jackson went through that in the minor leagues.
Yes, he did.
Right.
I was on a podcast with Reggie, and he talked about that. and he said John McNamara helped him because he wouldn't let them discriminate against him because John was his minor league manager, and Reggie had to go through those hard times. They all did. It was terrible. I mean, when they brought Eric Gregg through the minor leagues, they didn't let him work in the Southern League. They sent him to the Eastern League because they felt the repercussions from the fans and everything would be much easier on him. So they tried to protect him. But you know what? It happened in all aspects of American life, and people have to realize they didn't let Charlie Pride, when he came out with his first records, they didn't let him perform live until he had a hit. And then when he had a hit, and only then did they let him go on stage because they didn't want any repercussions from people saying, "Oh, this is a black singer. We don't want this," you know. And Charlie Pride was one of the greatest country singers of all time. And every artist that worked with him said he was a great professional. He was a great friend. In fact, I learned something from him in the Houston rodeo one time. I was backstage with him, and he's out watching the actors performing in front of him. And I said, "What are you doing?" I said, "This guy's an upstart." I said, "You're already an established star." He said, "Yeah, but if he says something to the crowd, I can't repeat it." And I said, like what? What are you talking about? And he said, "Well, if he walks out there and says, 'Y'all having a good time?' and the people go, 'Yeah, okay.' Well, I can't say that because then it look like I'm the stupidest guy in the world. If he sings one of my songs, I can't sing it. If he sings my biggest hit, I can't sing it because he just did it before me. That would be like me trying to show him up or him trying to show me up, and that's not fair."
Right.
So just sitting backstage with Charlie Pride, I learned a lesson in life that a lot of people don't even think about.
Yeah. Joe, when you were, I'm looking at the mechanics of you throwing people out. So I said to myself, you see that picture right there? With you and Madden, right? But hold on a minute. Then there's another. Now I say to myself, I wonder where he got his skills from. Then I figured out you were a great college quarterback because that looks like a bomb pass right there. You were in good
Yeah,
position. The weight is back, so it transformed into ejecting managers and players, right?
yeah. Well, those were both corner routes. You got to
Oh,
go in
okay.
with the
Because I'm saying to myself, wow, Joe West looks good while he throws people out. Look at his mechanics.
Yeah, then there was a couple of them I threw out kind of like this. They weren't worth the big motion.
Okay, Joe, what about the story with Joe Torre? Was that bullshit? Did the media blow that up?
Which one?
The one in 1983 when he was a manager for the Braves, I guess.
um, well, he followed us into the tunnel where we're supposed to go. It was not really a tunnel, but it was
Uh-huh.
an area where he didn't belong. And when I pushed him back, I said, "You don't belong here." And he said, "No, I don't." And he left. And of course, the media got pictures of it. So they went to him and they said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, he pushed me." And then they went to me and I said, "Yeah, I pushed him. He didn't belong to be there." And of course, he got fined a big amount of money, and I got suspended for a few days. But all the stuff that's been written about it, how we'd gotten a fist fight, that didn't happen. That was garbage. Somebody made that up. Of course, I think that was on Wikipedia, and you can't trust most of the stuff you see on that anyway. That's sensationalized. Anybody can write what you want on Wikipedia. So,
Right. Out of all the
but
managers, Joe, who was the one that kept bitching and bitching? I mean, you didn't throw him out until he crossed the line, and we're going to talk about when managers and coaches cross the line and players. When do you say, "All right, you know what? Now it's time for you to get out of my game"? So,
well,
the
you
manager
know,
gave you problems, but in a way, Joe, you're like, "All right, just shut your mouth already." Whatever, you gave him a chance.
well, I can honestly say because Earl Weaver was in the American League and I came up in the National League, that I only had Earl in 2 games. I can honestly say that Earl Weaver never finished a game I was in.
Really? He didn't like you? I mean, I don't get
Yeah,
it.
Well, the first time I kicked him out, he said, "You'll never see the big leagues making calls like that." And I said, "I've already been here 4 years." So he came out and he turned his hat around, and I said, "What are you trying to do? Get in my face?" And he says, "You know, damn good and well, I'm trying to get in your face." I said, "Well, come over here and stand on third base. You'll be a little taller." And that was like pouring gasoline on a fire. But he was the guy that never finished the game. I was in. I look back on a lot of these. If you look up retrosheet.org, they'll give you the umpire statistics. And the other day, I was looking on it, and I think the guy I kicked out the most was Ron Gardner.
Oh, Ron Gardner.
Yeah, and that had to be the last 22 years of my career because he came up as a Met, I think, and then he ended up managing the Twins when who was the guy that managed before him? I don't think he got kicked out twice in his life, and Gardner got kicked out twice the first week he replaced him. But anyway. I think I kicked out Gardner about 4 times. I think I kicked out Joe Torre about 3 times. I kicked out Bobby Cox 3 times. There's a lot in there I had trifectas with, but there were very few I kicked out 4 times. Maybe La Russa, but then
What about Guillen, Ozzie Guillen?
No, I only got him 3 times. So he's in the middle of the pack.
Joe, you think in Vegas they have the over and under, yes or no? Will Joe West throw out the manager today? You think they have a betting line like that?
Well, they have a betting line on everything. I remember going to the ballpark in Los Angeles one day, and somebody had given me a sheet of the over and under umpires. Mm-hmm. And so I'm kind of looking at it, and a friend of mine that went to the game with me, he would gamble whether the sun was going to come up. And so I showed it to him. Well, the 2 pitchers that day were, I think there was Valenzuela and Carlton. And it's the first time I'd ever seen a sheet like this. It was kind of funny because if you looked at it, it was early in the season. All the under umpires, meaning where the runs are going to be less than the line, all the under umpires were senior umpires. Well, that made sense because in the first of the season, your senior umpires are working the plate the first and fourth games and the first and or the second and seventh game, whatever. Anyway, so it adds up that the senior umpires are probably going to get the best starting pitching. So I'm just kind of looking at this, and then I looked at who was starting that day, and I handed him the sheet, and the game was supposed to be an under game because of the 2 pitchers, right? Mm-hmm. And of course, at the time, I was in the middle of the pack of the umpires, so he evidently bet a lot of money on this game for it to be an under game, and the score was like 11-9. When I got back to the car after the game, you'd have thought he'd lost his firstborn. So he was so upset. He said, "You were in your sheets." I said, "It's not my sheet. Somebody gave it to me."
Joe, when it comes to here's when I met you in Nashville, we talked about crossing the line, and you said, "I'm going to save it for the podcast." When do they cross the line for you to say, "You know what? You're at"?
Well,
what do they have to say? Is it personal? Is it description of yourself? What is it that you say, "All right, now you're gone"?
All right. Well, we're in spring training one day, and this guy, Ray Gandolf, is doing the interview. And he says he's talking to the other 2 umpires. There were only 3 of us working the game. And he's asking Steve Ripley about the baseball. And he says, "Why do you put mud on?" He says, "Well, to take the slickness off and the gloss off. One's for the hitter and one's for the pitcher." He says, and he picked up a brand new ball that hadn't been rubbed up. And he says, "See, this is the showpiece." And then he picked up one that was rubbed up, and he said, "This is the work piece." And then he went right from that question. He looked right at Larry Young, who was the American League umpire that day. And he said, "What does it take for me to say to you to get kicked out of the game?" And I know that he had thought about this because this was a brilliant answer. He said, "Call me something I'm not." And I said, yeah, tell him he's good looking. That'll get you kicked out of the game. And so that, of course, that was the biggest thing in the interview when it got back to ABC. So they called me something like that. So to this day, we still laugh about that. But and that's pretty much accurate. If they say you are this, you're probably going to be gone. You are bad. You are whatever. You're probably going to be gone. But they can't make it personal. They can say that's a bad call. That call stinks. That calls this. If they make it personal, they're gone, and that's the way it's been for 100 years.
Okay, so Joe, as a batter, right? The pitcher clips the outside corner, maybe an inch off. You call strike 3 on me, and I look at you like, what the fuck? Are you going to throw me out?
No.
All right. What if I say, you know what, Joe? You're the worst fucking umpire ever. You're going to throw me?
You're going. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I remember one day I got the Padres and Alan Wiggins hit the first ball to center field for base hit. The second pitch of the game, Tony Gwynn hit a ball to the left side single. So they got 2 runners on. The third hitter, Steve Garvey. I haven't called a pitch yet. The third pitch comes in, and it was probably a little high, and I went strike 1. And Garvey steps out of the box and picked up dirt and rubbed it in his hands. Steve Garvey never picked up dirt ever in his life and rubbed it in his hands. He steps back in the box, he tapped home plate, and he pulled the bat back, and he looked at me, and he said, "Are we ready now?" Just like that. And I was laughing. The kid Scott Rowland one day, he says, after I called a pitch on him he didn't like, he says, is something about having a spasm? He said, "Is the spasm over yet?" So, those are funny. You think about it, that's funny. And I'll never forget when David Ortiz came to the big leagues. He was a Minnesota Twin, and I had him in a spring training game right over here at Tinker Field in Orlando. And they put him in the 9th inning as a defensive replacement. Now that he was not a defensive player by any means of the imagination. And and I knew it was like his first game or his first year. And when he finished throwing the ball around to the other infielders, he's walking back toward me at first base, and I said, I hope you play in this league a long time. And in his broken English, he said, thank you very much. And I said, because as long as you're in this league, I won't be the ugliest guy in it. and he just put his head down because he knew I'd gotten him, right? So now he gets traded to the Red Sox. He becomes, Mr. Red Sox. He's got MVP of this, MVP of that, most valuable player of the World Series, blah, blah, blah. And then he plays a couple more years, and now he announces his retirement. So during that time, I had a feud with a couple of sports writers about their pace of play. I had made the statement that the Yankees and the Red Sox are insulting the way they treat Commissioner Selig's edict on the pace of play. And the media kind of ripped me, but half of them took up for me. They said I was exactly right. Nobody had the guts to say anything about it. But anyway, so now Big Papi comes to bat in about May of the year that he's announced his retirement. Everybody knows he's announced his retirement. And he comes to bat and he says, "I have something to tell you." I said, "I don't want to hear it. Get in the box. You guys take too long to play. Just let me tell you one thing." I said, "Okay, tell me one thing." So he said, "I'm retiring." Well, that kind of upset me. I said, "I don't give a damn if you retire. Get in the box." He said, "Just one thing." I said, "All right, hurry up. Tell me what you got to tell me." He said, "Next year, you'll be the ugliest guy in the league."
That's a classic story, man. That's awesome. Joe, when you see these players come up, right? Do you have instincts too, as far as like, this guy's going to be a superstar? Like when you saw Jeter for the first time, right? Were you like, this guy's going to be special?
Yeah, well, Jeter's to the Yankees what Roger Staubach was to the Cowboys. He might not be the best player, but he was a winner, and everybody followed him. Everybody, they went, whatever he said we're going to do, we're going to do. I mean, some of the things he did, like jumping in the stands to catch that ball, or taking that cutoff that was in front of home plate and flipping it back to the catcher. Those are unbelievable plays. I mean, most shortstop wouldn't have ever been in that position to throw that guy out of home plate in that playoff game. But the point being, he was a winner, and he made everyone around him better. He was like Larry Bird was to the Celtics. Would you say Larry Bird was the best player you ever saw? Not in your wildest dreams, but where he went and where he taught everybody around him to be better, that's invaluable. You can't buy that. So a guy like Derek Jeter's an awesome example of what hard work and keeping your head in the game will do for you, because he made the most of his talent. And I mean, he wasn't going to hit 50 home runs, and he didn't have the strongest throwing arm from shortstop, but he made every play, you know. So those are the kinds of people that you look back on and say they did more with their talent than anybody else.
Yeah.
And then you have somebody come along like Darryl Strawberry, who had more talent than anybody else and wasted it. And he'll tell you today, you know, I could have been better. And that's a crying shame, because there's a kid that today would give you the shirt off his back, and back then he didn't care if the sun didn't come up, you know.
Yeah.
But and those are some sad things. I mean, I've been lucky enough to see some of the greatest players in the world. I was there for Nolan Ryan's 5th no-hitter. I was at first base. I was behind home plate when Willie McCovey hit his 500th home run.
But you didn't even know it was his 500 home run until you checked the jumbotron.
That's right. I didn't
right?
know I didn't know it was his 500th until I looked at the scoreboard and it was up there. But I had all the years I worked, I only had one no-hitter behind the plate, and it was Clay Buchholz, and it was like his second game he ever started. I got a call from Terry Tata, who was a longtime National League umpire. He said, "Who is Clay Buchholz?" I said, "Well, he just threw a no-hitter." He said, "When I had no-hitters, I had Phil Necro and Tom Seaver." I said, "Well, anybody can have a no-hitter with them. This guy's a newcomer."
right. Well, but didn't you have Felix Hernandez?
No, I was on the bases for that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And the only no-hitter I had behind the plate was Buchholz.
Is it nerve-wracking, Joe? Are you nervous too? Like, holy shit, this guy's pitching a no-hit. It's like the 7th or 8th inning. You're like, oh my God. I mean, do you get a little nervous too?
If you notice it, then you take more time. Because the biggest thing about umpiring is don't overreact. Let the pitch come to you. Let the play happen. It's a funny thing, because you try to give this advice to every umpire. There are only 3 ways you can miss a play or a pitch. It's lack of concentration. That's paying attention to what you're doing. Lack of positioning, and sometimes the players will take you out of position. And lack of timing, and that means wait till it's all over till you've gathered all the evidence. Just like a judge would wait to make his decision in a court case, and that's how you have to do it. And if you do those 3 things in that order, you've got a better chance of getting through. You can have 2 of those things go wrong, but if you have one of them, you got a chance to get in the play or the pitch right. And it's hard to teach that, because when young umpires come up, they want to show everybody, I can do this. And they're pumped up and they try to do things before it happens. But if you'll watch the older veteran umpires, they wait till it's all over and then they make the call. So, and that's a hard thing to teach a young guy, to have that discipline to wait. So, but yeah, when you see that they've got a no-hitter, you go, well, okay, let's bear down now. Let's don't mess this thing up, because I don't want them blaming me for losing a no-hitter. And one time there was an umpire named Bruce Fleming, and he called ball 4 on a 3-2 pitch from Milt Pappas, and it blew his perfect game. Right? So after the game, the reporters came in the locker room and said, Bruce, if you'd have called that last pitch that you called ball 4, if you'd have called that a strike, you'd have been the 13th umpire with a perfect game. That's how long ago it was. You'd have been the 13th umpire to call a perfect game. And Bruce looked at him and said, can you name the other 12? And of course they couldn't, because nobody really pays attention to what you do. And there, that's another fallacy about umpiring. They all say, "Oh, he was a great umpire because you didn't even know he was out there." So if the guy balks with a runner on third base and you don't call it, that means you're a good umpire. So if the guy interferes with a play at second base and you don't call it, does that mean you're a good umpire? No, it doesn't mean you're a good umpire. The guys that do their job and are respected by the players for doing their job, they're the better umpires, and you know that, and the players know that. There'll be times when I would walk on the field in the minor leagues, the players hated me because I was a disciplinarian. I didn't put up with their crap. When John Shulock and I would walk on the field in the Southern League, you could hear the dugouts go, "Uh-oh." But they would rather have those kind of umpires behind the plate in the big game than they would somebody who's not going to take charge of the game. And you'll notice that the older senior umpires have more success handling beanball situations too, which is another thing that's very important. And I can remember, and this is a funny story. I'll give you this because this is a classic. I was talking to Scott Boras, who was a super agent, which most of the people following this know who he is. And I was asking him about our negotiations because I was negotiating the next contract for the umpires. And I was trying to get the senior umpires to a level at where the minimum player salary was, or just beyond. And he goes into this dissertation about how you have to show baseball what your worth is to them, and you have to show baseball that you're a valuable commodity. And then he said, but you can't compare yourself to the ball players, even though that ball player is only going to play one day a month, and you're working every day. You have to show baseball what your value is. There should never be a game played with big league players where there's not at least one major league umpire on the field for instances such as beanball stuff and stuff that would happen in the big leagues. And that made a lot of sense. And then the last thing he said to me in front of his staff, this was in his little suite at Anaheim Stadium. The last thing he said is, I can guarantee, and I'll give him credit, he knew there were only 68 of us umpires at the time. He said, I can guarantee that the top 68 proctologists all make more money than you. That's what he said. And I said, yeah, and they only got to look at one asshole at a time.
Joe, talk to me about the Glavine strike zone. I remember the 90s. Is this true? Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know. But I'm guessing this, right? If the pitcher is consistent on the outside corner or a little inch off, you're going to give him that call. Is that true? Is it bullshit? Yes or no? What is it?
No. And you know what? The Braves were very adept at picking on the younger umpires because they had a catcher named Lopez who was very good at catching the ball. And he never sat behind home plate. He either sat on the inside corner or the outside corner. So he can catch a ball that's 2-3 inches outside, and it looks like it's right down the middle. So when he'd do that, if the dugout yelled, it depended on the strength of the home plate umpire whether he was going to listen to it. Some guys would just look over, and that would be the end of it, because he'd go in the dugout and say, "No, the ball's outside. I got it." And Lopez never questioned the umpire's call. He would let the dugout scream. So you get a young umpire coming up or a kid that just is working his first week in the big leagues or whatever, and he'd have Tom Glavine or Maddox on the mound, and they'd throw the ball and he'd catch one like that, and they'd start screaming from the dugout. Well, he didn't have the experience to handle the stuff in the dugout. So he might give in for one pitch or two pitches. So that's the ball you see that's this far off the plate. And he called it a strike, and he was wrong. And those are the kinds of kids that you had to take aside and say, look, you got three responsibilities to the game. The first responsibility is to the game of baseball. And that doesn't mean the commissioner's office. That means the game of baseball. Your second responsibility is to your profession, and that means the other umpires. It doesn't mean the union. It means what you're doing on the field. And for you to call that pitch outside, you're not being consistent in helping your profession. And your third responsibility is to do what you know is morally honest and correct in your heart. And if you do those three things in that order, you're going to get criticized, but you're still going to be right. And then you've done everything the way you're supposed to do it. And until the younger umpire gets that in his mindset, this is what I have to do, that he's going to struggle and he's going to have problems. But if that young umpire takes the bull by the horns early in his career, he's going to be just fine.
Saying that's what you did when you came up then.
Exactly. Yeah. I didn't care how loud they yelled. They just better not say I'm good looking.
Right? So pretty much, Joe, strike's a strike, a ball's a ball, and that's how it goes.
Well, here's the other thing. You hear this term controversial. That's not a word in baseball. There's nothing controversial in baseball. The umpire's either right or he's wrong. It's that simple. Controversial is a made up word. That's like being politically correct. That means nothing.
Right.
Being right or he's wrong. That's the way it is. That's as simple as you can make it, and that's how you should make it. So I don't want to hear anybody say this guy's controversial. This guy looks for attention. Joe Girardi yelled at me one day from the dugout, and I threw him out of the game. He came out and he said, "You just did that so everybody know you're here." I said, "Joe, I've been here 40 years. I think when I walked down here, most everybody knew I was here." And I mean, but he made that statement, and he had heard that somewhere. You made that call just to show everybody you were here. Well, that's not true. You made that call because it's the right call. And I love Joe Girardi. Don't get me wrong, but that was the wrong thing to say at that time. You know what I'm saying? Tony La Russa told me one day, he said, if we were in St. Louis, you wouldn't have called that. I jerked him right out of the game. You're accusing me of cheating because I'm not in St. Louis,
Right. Joe, what about as far as a hitter, right? Here's the thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I hear these announcers and I'm like, is that really accurate? So for instance, I'll give you an example. You got a young hitter, guy, first 3 years in the league, or a rookie comes up. You call strike three on him, inch or 2 inches outside, whatever you call it. Not you, but in general, right? Then I hear announcers, well, when Barry Bonds is up, his zone is this small. Is that true, Joe?
No, and I think that's the good thing about baseball is there's no home field advantage with the officials. In basketball and in football where they throw stuff and they're so close to the officials, the official doesn't. Sometimes they don't have a chance. I've seen games where they threw stuff at the referees in football. I've seen games where fans have come out of the stands and attack a referee in basketball. You don't have that in baseball. And the greatest thing about baseball is umpires really have blinders as to where they are. I think one of the funniest stories I ever heard about stuff like that was when Garth Brooks went to spring training with the Padres. Bruce Bochy put him in as a pinch runner. And he got picked off at first base from here to New York. And when Mark Grace tagged him, Eddie Montague, the base umpire, called him safe. And Garth got up and hugged Eddie Montague. And of course, this is a spring training game. The whole place gave him a standing ovation and everything. So after the game, the reporters came by Montague's locker room and said, it appeared that Garth was out at first base on the pickup. They knew what happened, right? Mm-hmm. And Eddie says, I can call out Mark Grace and I can call out Barry Bonds. But if I call out Garth Brooks, I can't go home. So to this day, Eddie Montague and Garth Brooks are friends. And it's really, what a classic little story. But Barry Bonds, first of all, you wouldn't call out Barry Bonds on a pitch that's an inch off the plate because he'd have probably hit it. And I remember one day we're in Houston and they threw a curveball behind him. A curveball. And it was behind him. So I warned the pitcher. And here comes Phil Garner, the manager of the Astros. And he said, it was a curveball. I said, that's the only reason he's not gone. The only reason I didn't kick him out because it's a curveball. I said he threw it behind him. And Garner says, well, we're not doing too good throwing it in front of him.
Joe, do umpires go through slumps too?
I think so. There'll be times when the travel beats you up, or you're exhausted just from trying to get to the game, or you had a night game that went after midnight. Now you got a 1 o'clock day game. Sometimes that happens. Yeah, I'm sure it does. But you know what? You hit a reset button as soon as it does, because no one wants to miss a pitch. No one wants to miss a play. No one wants to be on ESPN at Sports Center saying, well, the reason this happened is because of the umpire. They don't want that. And then again, sometimes you get criticized for doing the right thing. Sometimes you get criticized for throwing a guy out of the game that you should throw out of the game. But here's another thing. And I can remember, just like it was yesterday, Al Barlick, who's a Hall of Fame umpire, told me, he said, it's very bad to kick out someone who doesn't deserve to get kicked out. But it's far worse to keep a guy in the game that should have been kicked out, because now your peers have to come behind you and clean up your mess. And what he meant by that is, if you don't throw the guy out when you should have thrown him out, you're cheating your profession and you're cheating the game of baseball, which is what we talked about, the other three things. And it makes a lot of sense. And he was adamant that if they didn't know your name when the game was over, at least the players, then you weren't doing your job because you didn't take charge of the game. So,
the incident, here's what I want to know. You did the 93 Phillies, right? National League Championship Series. Did you ump that game?
I don't remember.
But, like, I look at that Phillies team in 93, right? And I'm saying to myself, first it starts off with the manager, Jim Fregosi, Dykstra, Morandini. Who else you had? Duncan was on the team. Kruk. When you saw that team, were you like, did you smell the alcohol out of them? I mean, these guys look like they were party animals, man.
Well, they had Darren Dalton. I think he married the Hooters model, didn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were a great team, and it's really funny. I did a banquet one time at the Philadelphia Sports Writers dinner, and there's a row of the Phillies there. And of all those players, Dalton, Dykstra, Schilling, all those, I never had to kick one of them out of the game. You know, I kicked Fregosi out a couple of times, but I never had to kick one of them out. And they were hard nosed. They played hard. And that's as good a team as they were. I'm not so sure they were as good as the 1980 team that had Schmidt and Boa and Trio and Lazinski, and they had this also ran guy named Pete Rose that played for him at first base, and Bob Boone, and I think right in the middle of the year they changed managers for Dallas Green came in. That might have been the best Phillies team I've seen, but yeah, the '93 team was good. They had some great players.
No, but I'm just saying, like, they didn't look like all American athletes. I mean, how much tobacco when Dykstra was up that you would be like, oh man, this guy's giving me a waterfall here.
Yeah, well, John Kruk even said, he says, I'm not an athlete, I'm a baseball player.
Has it ever happened you're at a bar after a game just hanging out with your umpire crew, and ESPN, there's a highlight of you throwing out a manager, and some person randomly next to you be like, is that you? Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah, and I'd always say, no, that's my brother. I got a twin brother. So,
oh, okay. Any stories like that?
Yeah, well, the crazy thing is today you can't go anywhere in public. Somebody's got a camera or their phone or whatever. They take a picture of you. So it's tough to go out in public today, but it's a lot of fun. Living down here in the middle of Florida where I am, I'm in a little town called Claremont. It's great because when you tell them that I was a baseball umpire, they said, oh, did you work Little League? I said, not very long, no.
Yeah, Joe, throughout your years, right, when you were younger, and people say, hey, what do you do for a living? And when you tell them I'm an MLB umpire, they're like, what?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Do they get shocked?
I was on a plane one time with this guy, and he was the executive director and producer of the movie The Naked Gun. And I said, really? He says, yeah. I said, that was a great movie. He said, yeah, I thought it was. It was really funny and everything. He said, what do you do? I said, I'm a baseball umpire. He said, I know a baseball umpire. His name is Joe West. I said, I'm Joe West. So I said, Yeah, I was in New York negotiating an umpire's contract, and with Phil Cuzzy, and I went to the bar to get us a drink after the negotiation was over. And this little blonde comes up to the bar, and I looked at her, and I said, "Anyone ever tell you you look like Lori Morgan?" She said, "That's because that's who I am. I am Lori Morgan." Now, kind of threw me off, but Lori Morgan is a famous country singer, and I said, "Do you know John Hobbs?" Now, John Hobbs was a saloon owner in Nashville. She said, "I used to work for John Hobbs." I said, "Do you remember doing a benefit for Pee Wee, one of George Jones's roadies, for a cancer benefit?" She said, "I certainly do." I said, "Do you remember who sang after you and your husband at the time, Kershaw? That you remember who sang after you and before Tanya Tucker?" She said, "Yeah, it was this umpire named Joe West." And I said, "Hi, I'm Joe West."
Joe, you're speaking of an instrument right there. Is that you right there, that picture?
Yeah, but you got a bad hat. You need to get a better hat.
Yeah, well, what can I do? That's all I saw. So you love music. You love country music, right? That's your passion?
Yeah, well, I like all kinds of music. I mean, but yeah, I've got a lot of friends in the business. One of my good friends is the used to be the bass player for Chicago. His name was Jason Schiff, and I'm good friends with the Oak Ridge Boys. You know, the Oak Ridge Boys called the White Sox and asked if they could sing the national anthem for my record-breaking game. So they were there. Larry Gatlin was there. Amy Lou Harris was there. We had a whole bunch of people that, that game was the most expensive game I ever worked. I had to buy 127 tickets.
Oh
So,
my God.
yeah, well, Jerry Reinsdorf told me, he said, I can't give you these tickets, Joe. I said, I know that. I said, just don't beat me up so bad.
Do umpires give complimentary tickets too?
Yeah,
Like ball players?
yeah.
But what's your limit? Like four individually?
I think it's six.
Six. But then,
I think it's six for regular season games and it's four for postseason stuff.
but also you could ask during the season. You could ask another umpire, "Hey, can I get you four tickets? I have friends in Chicago like that." Or
Yeah,
something, right?
yeah, and you can buy tickets when you go over your limit, so they don't take that away from you.
Now, in the movie The Naked Gun, did you have to audition, or they said, "Joe, we want you to ump in this film"?
Well, that was a funny thing because Lee Wire had the part originally because it was set up for a day actor. He was going to have one speaking part, but he had to be there for a couple of weeks for the background stuff. And so Lee couldn't do it because he had a crew chief meeting, and he didn't want to tell the National League, I can't do the crew chief meeting because I'm in a movie. So Lee turned it down. So he said, "Who can we call?" Well, the guy that Lee worked with all the time was a guy named Eddie Montague. And so they called Eddie and they said, "We want you to be in LA 3 weeks and blah, blah, blah." Well, Eddie was married. He had kids growing up. He says, "I ain't doing that." So they said, "Who can you call?" Well, he said, "Joe West is single. Call him." So they called me and I said, "Okay, how much?" And he said, $1,000 a week. I said, "Plus expenses?" He says, "No, no, this is for a day actor." And I said, "I'm not coming to LA for 3 weeks for $1,000. So I hung up. About 30 minutes later, they called back and said, "We'll give you $3,000 a week." So it tripled the amount they were going to pay me. So I said, "I got some friends out there. I'll bunk in with them and I'll go do the movie and, it'll be cool. I'll pay them, 1,500 or what a week and they'll be tickled to death." Right. So sure enough, I go out and I didn't know at the time that when they pay you the residuals for the movie, they pay you on your salary. They don't pay you for expenses. So I got about a little over 10,000 for the movie because we went a couple of days long. And that movie was in the middle 80s. And I've made probably, I want to say, 200,000 in residuals.
200,000 residuals.
Yeah. Now Reggie Jackson was in that film. So he got 80,000 for one day. And I got 8,000 for 3 weeks. So if I made 200,000 in residuals, Reggie had to make 10 times that. So
Were you thinking about changing careers at that time? Like, wait a minute.
no, no, but we had a great time. It was a lot of fun. The first base umpire in that film was Hank Robinson, and Hank was an old time extra on just about everything out there. He was Lorne Green's double in Bonanza. He had the gray hair. So if you ever saw Lorne Green on a horse, it was Hank, because Lorne Green was scared to death of horses. So, but anyway, Hank was the first baseman. Hank was the plate umpire in every game of Angels in the Outfield. If you go back and watch the movie Angels in the Outfield, Hank was the plate umpire in every game because he had the gray hair. He was the perfect fit to be the umpire. So never umpired a game in his life, but yet he is Hollywood's umpire. So,
All right, now speaking of positioning, this is what I want to know, right? As an umpire, when you see the catcher set up on the outside corner, right, or the inside corner, do you expect the pitch on the outside corner to be outside? That's what the pitcher's aiming for. That's what the catcher's demanding, right? How do you position yourself now? And also, do you have a better view when he sets up inside or outside?
well, I never moved. I always was over the inside corner of the hitter. Now that means I'd try to get my face over the inside corner of the hitter for one reason: safety. Because a ball that comes off the outside cylinder of the bat is going to accelerate. A ball that comes off the inside cylinder of the bat will slow down. And how it does that, I do not know. But I do know that the pitcher can throw a ball 80, 90, 100 miles an hour, and the hitter foul it off the outside of his bat, and it'll go in the upper deck. Well, the pitcher couldn't have thrown the ball there if he had to. And yet the ball coming off the outside of the bat, going the complete opposite direction, will accelerate. And the ball coming off the inside of the cylinder or the inside of the swing, which is not going as fast as the outside, will slow down. So you sit over the inside corner of the catcher for safety reasons, because the worst you're going to get hurt is with a concussion on a ball that hits you in the face. Now, I never had a concussion. Of course, there's a lot of people that would like to have given me one, but I never had a concussion the whole time I worked in Major League Baseball. And of course, that's another funny story in itself, because Dave Casper's a friend of mine who played for the Raiders. And they went to him when they were doing this concussion protocol, and they said, how many concussions did you have? He said, how would I know? And they said, well, what do you mean, how would you know? You would know if you had He says, no, I wouldn't. I just went back in there and played. I wouldn't know if I had. So after he told me the story, I said, well, I know you had two, Dave. He said, how do you know I had two concussions? I said, well, the one where you went to the wrong huddle and the one where you went to the wrong sideline. I would say you had two concussions.
But back to the positioning. Okay, so you're saying is that you stayed on the inside because for safety reasons. Are you one of the umpires that does that, or are there other umpires that do?
No, they're all taught to stay there for positioning, for safety reasons. Baseball doesn't want their umpires getting knocked out with a foul ball that they shouldn't get hit with. I mean, we had people in the late '90s and early 2000s that had concussions, had spinal problems from getting hit with balls that would come off the outside of the bat, and they actually drew a chart up. Mark Latante, who was the director of umpire medical services, he drew a chart up, has it in every locker room, that this is where he wants you to be. Now he wants you to look out into the strike zone. He doesn't want you to be looking down through it, but he wants you to look out in the strike zone, which you and the catcher probably have the best look of anybody as to whether the ball is a strike or a ball.
Yeah, but I feel like you guys have a better view on the inside fastball than the outside fastball.
Okay, I'll give you an example. And I've said this to a lot of young umpires that came up and worked with me. I said, if the ball's over the inside corner, you see it right away, you call it right away. And they go, yes. Ball's down the middle of the plate, you see it right away, you call it right away. Yes. I said, now the ball on the outside corner, do you wait just a little bit longer? And they go, well, yes, we do. I said, well, then why don't you set your timing for the ball that's going to be on the outside corner, whether it's a ball or a strike, and make that your timing for all your pitches, and then it doesn't look like you've changed anything. And they go, wow, that's brilliant. How did you come up with that? I said, well, I've been doing this a little while, So, but that's how you should do it. You should set your timing on your toughest pitch. It's like when you get in position for play on the bases, you should start where your toughest play is going to be. Then if it adjusts and it's a normal play, you can take one step or another to be in perfect position. But as I said before, positioning, concentration, positioning, and timing. And that's the secret of all umpiring.
But that's hard to do because you got to have a lot of reps. A lot.
Oh yeah. And
right?
we don't have rehearsal. That's
Right.
another thing. We don't have rehearsal. Like the players have batting practice, they have infield practice. We don't have rehearsal. I can remember playing golf one day with Glenn Campbell out in Arizona. We were playing this Whisper Rock was the golf course. And I'm playing with Glenn and his drummer. I'm trying to remember. I think the fourth was Mark Grace. It was after he retired and he was announcing. Anyway, Mark set this thing up. So we're on the putting green, and here comes Glenn Campbell, and he's got his hat, and he's like something dressed out of GQ. He's just perfect, right? And he looks at the drummer, and he looked at Gary, and he says, are you going to rehearsal? And all I can think of is, I got you in trouble by taking you to play golf. You're supposed to be at rehearsal. And Gary says, no, Glenn calls hitting balls at the range rehearsal.
So pretty much your rehearsal is live games, all that.
That's exactly right.
The winter leagues, the different leagues, and then the big leagues, right? That's your rehearsal live.
Yeah, there's no rehearsal for the umpire. So,
Joe, can you get fooled on a pitch too sometimes? Like you're like, holy shit, Gooden's curveball, 12-6. That fooled the shit out of me.
Well, that's because you're not paying attention.
In the warm-ups, you got to pay attention then.
You have to pay attention. You have to concentrate on what you're doing. That's the important part. And again, it's you make it simple. People say, well, it's tough to call Nolan Ryan's fastball. No, Nolan Ryan's fastball, Dwight Gooden's fastball, J.R. Richards' fastball, they were the easiest pitches once you learn how to do this because the ball levels out. It's the sliders, the knuckleball at the knees, the curveball. Those are the tough pitches. The harder they throw it, the easier it is if you learn how to do this.
Joe, did you have rabbit ears? Like you were here in the dugout, like the manager, like, what the fuck is Joe doing, man? Jesus Christ, that was a ball. Like, do you have rabbit ears or no?
Larry Anderson used to say I had bionic ears.
So you would hear them chirping in the dugout, right?
Yeah, but they thought I was crazy. I'd just look over there and they wouldn't say anything else.
Yeah, and speaking of stare down, you and what's that pitcher from San Francisco, the lefty?
Bumgarner.
Yeah. And then when you look at him, now, what's your psychologically, what are you doing there when you're looking at him like that? What was your intention?
Well, he was mad about a couple pitches earlier. He wanted a strike. And the pitch, he used profanity on the last pitch. It was outside. And that's why it drew so much attention because the ball wasn't close to being a strike. And when he yelled profanity that I could hear, and I knew the people in the front rows could hear, by rule, I could kick him out of the game. I don't really want to kick a starting pitcher out of the game because he's frustrated, and he wasn't saying the profanity directed at me. So I stared at him to let him know you can't do that. The only other thing I could have probably done was walk down and said, you see those 20 people in the first two rows? I said, you need to go apologize to them for using that kind of language. Well, that's not going to happen. So, the stare down was perfect. He got the message. Everybody in baseball got the message. I even got a call from the office and said, what are you doing? I said, did you want me to kick him off the mound? They said, no. So,
and then the funny thing is Jimmy Rollins, I think, is going third base. And he's just staring at you. Did you get the joke when he was looking at you at first or no?
Oh, yeah. The first thing I said is, you're not going to win either.
I think that was hilarious. Now, okay, let's turn back the clock with Andre Dawson. When you have a guy like that, calm guy, and all of a sudden he just flips out, right? The next day at the ballpark, are you guys like friends again?
Oh yeah, he's a great guy. There's nothing wrong with him. I mean, and that's another thing. He got mad because I threw him out, and I threw him out because he wouldn't leave. I said, "We're going to play this game with or without you. You can either leave or I'll throw you out." And so, that was what happened. And I told somebody I sold more beer in one swing of my arm that day than the Cubs sold in 3 innings because they threw all the beer they had on the field.
Right.
So,
But like, are they getting personal at that moment? He's heated. He's throwing through like 12 bats. Is he like saying like personal stuff?
well, he threw 6 bats the first time. And then when I went over and started counting them, he started throwing some more. So I probably instigated that. That wasn't fair to him. So, and he did get me back because it made the media that when he wrote the check for $1,000 for getting fined, he wrote on the little memo, he said, "Donation to the blind."
So Joe, if I was a hitter and I said, "What are you, fucking Helen Keller? How do you not see that pitch?" You would throw me out.
You'd been gone. Yeah.
Okay, that's unreal. What happened with the pine tar with Jay Howell? How did you notice that back then in '88? I think it happened.
Oh, that was with the Dodgers and the Mets, yeah. David Johnson came to home plate and he said, "I don't want to do this." He said, "But my owners have called me and told me I need to check his glove." I said, "You want to open this can of worms in the playoffs?" He said, "No, but my owners have called me and told me I need to go check him." Right. So I start to the mound to check him. I'm not real happy that we're going to do this, but I go to the mound to check him, and I can see that he's fidgeting with his glove. So I called in the crew chief, who's in left field, Harry Wendelstedt, and Harry came in. In fact, the whole crew came in, and I went to take the glove from Jay, and he won't give it to me. I said, "I'm going to tell you real simply: if you don't give me the glove, you're gone automatically. You can keep the glove and you're gone, or you can give me the glove, let me inspect it." So he hands me the glove. So it's got pine tar all over the inside of it. So when Harry gets there, I hand it
Wait,
to
Joe,
Harry.
the pine tar is inside the finger of the glove?
No, it's in the palm.
Oh, it's a palm. Okay.
Yeah. So I hand the glove to Harry, and Harry puts it on like he's a fielder, and he goes, "Oh, it's not too bad." And Rick Dempsey goes, "Yeah, Harry, that's not too bad." And he reaches in like that. And Paul Runge peeled Dempsey out of there real quick, right? And so I looked at Harry. I said, "Harry, one of us has got to kick him out of the game. Now, you still have that umpire school in Florida, right?" He says, "Yeah, I got this." Gone. So he kicked out JL right off the mound. And now there's always this turmoil about, who has the evidence? Prove this. So we went over and handed the glove to the league president, Bart Giamatti. We put it right in his lap. So you can't say there was any loss of the chain of evidence, So and of course Tommy Lasorda said, "How did you do this to me?" I said, "Tommy, we didn't do it. He's the one that had pine tar in his glove." So after the game, all the reporters, this is a big to do because we kicked the guy out in a playoff game. And they asked Lasorda if he would doctor the ball. He said, "Hell yeah, I wasn't as good a pitcher as he is."
But you're not allowed to have pine tar on the glove. Is that what you're saying?
No, you can't have any foreign substance on his glove. In fact, the only thing they can have out there on the mound is the rosin. And this is how good they've gotten. They've shown that if they use sunscreen and rosin, they can grip the ball better. And so now we have to check them for that, or the umpires today have to check. I don't have to do that anymore. So, but
did you do the '86 National League Championship Series, the Mets and the Astros?
Yeah.
Now, I remember them saying that Mike Scott was so nasty, his pitches, that people were like, he has to have substances on his glove. Is that true, Joe? I mean, you were there.
Yeah, they checked him almost every series that year. But they also checked Don Sutton when he was with the Dodgers. when he came over to pitch for the Astros. But I had the plate for the 6th game of that series, and they had Dwight Gooden against Nolan Ryan, and they struck out everybody but the Bat Boys. It was the most amazing thing you've ever seen. I mean, here's one guy on the mound looks like a linebacker, and the other guy looks like a skinny kid from the ghetto, and they both threw gas. I mean, they both threw just as hard, and when they broke a curveball off, the hitter's knees were buckling. It was unbelievable. That may be one of the best games I've ever seen by both pitchers. So and
Joe, who was the nastiest pitcher? You're like, holy shit, his ball moves.
Well, J.R. Richard probably had the best stuff, but he couldn't control it like guys like Seaver. Tom Seaver might be the best pitcher I ever saw. Him and I got Carlton right at the end of his career. He was great. Randy Johnson was good. Seaver was. I had Nolan Ryan when he came over from the Astros or to the Astros, and I'll never forget it was one of his first games. He hit Dave Winfield. Winfield was playing with the Padres, and Winfield went to the mound to try to tear his head off. And it took 2 teams, 4 umpires, and a half a dozen police officers to separate them. And after the game, Ryan said, if I'm going to hit somebody in this league, I better learn how to fight.
Well, he did great with Robin Ventura.
Yeah. Yeah, he did. Yeah, he got that from Dave Winfield. Robin should be mad at Winfield for that. But those are some wild days back then.
Oh yeah, Joe, the best hitter. What you witnessed from your 43 years of umpiring, like who was the guy?
Well, the most dangerous were Bonds and Pujols.
Oh wow, Pujols.
Yeah, Joe Morgan asked me one day after he was retired and he's doing all his announcing stuff and everything. And he said, who's the greatest player you ever saw? And I said, because I didn't have him on the field, I always say Willie Mays, Joe. And he said, well, that's a good pick.
Did you ever see pitches that Bonds was way inside and he kept it in the fair territory?
Yeah, well, yeah. That's why he was so dangerous, because he could keep the lag on his swing back better than anybody. He was like, you see these golfers that have great lag in their swing. Bonds had that. And Bond could hit the ball 6 inches off the plate. He could, and he had great bat speed, and he had great control, and he had great balance. And I can remember when he first came up, he was a cocky kid, and he was a great player when he first came up, and he got bigger and stronger. And a lot of people blame it on the steroids and stuff, but I don't think he took steroids. They have stuff that they call human growth hormones, and that was never banned until just recently. I don't even know if they had a test until just recently for that. And I think he and Tiger Woods both took the human growth hormones, and I don't know that there's any testing today that can measure that, but it's not a bad thing for your system because it has no side effects. Where the steroids, they can kill you. So, but I mean, I'm just speculating. I can't say that for a fact. But the point being, he was the best left-handed hitter I ever saw. Now, I didn't see Ted Williams, and of course, even though people asked me what it was like to work when Babe Ruth played, I didn't see him either. So,
damn, they think you're that old. Any stadiums that was tough for you to see, like as far as like calling games?
No, you know what? It was really funny. When we played in the old ballpark in Cincinnati before this new one, they kept the center field bleachers blank until a left-hander for the Reds pitched, and then they would fill the seats up where the pitcher would throw the ball out of it. They did a lot of sneaky things, back then. I can remember when they And stadiums are beautiful. You know, there's no greater feeling than to walk up that tunnel and look out on the green grass, and you go, "Wow, how did they get that grass so green?" You know, because they're immaculate. The groundskeepers and everybody keep the place so nice. But I think the sad thing is our old ballparks really need refurbishing. As much as people love Wrigley Field and Fenway Park, I think there are two worst ballparks, basically because they're just old. But I will tell you a great ballpark story. When they built the stadium in Denver, Coors Field, the general manager was Bob Gephardt. And Bob came to me one day and he says, "You know, we have the greatest backdrop for the hitter's eye that any stadium in baseball." And he's right. It's the best backdrop. I can remember rookie hitters come up and say, "Anybody can hit here. This is the greatest place to hit in the world." But he says, our advertisers wanted to put signs all over it. It took everything I could do to keep them from putting signs on the backdrop. He said, and then our designers for the stadium built it so that we're going to park all the handicapped people in left field. And we're going to roll their wheelchairs right up to the chain link fence in left field so that our handicapped people can sit at field level in left field and they can get out because they can go to their cars in the players' parking lot. And he says everything worked great until one of our guys hit a home run and 13 people got up out of the wheelchairs and ran for the ball.
Oh, God. That's awesome. Wow. Joe, what about, I love this story. I heard this with, was it Frank Robinson when you said, hey, someone has to get thrown out. If you're not going to get thrown out, then you're going to have to pick somebody to get thrown out of the game. Tell me about
that. That happened in Dodger Stadium, and somebody yelled at the plate umpire, Bruce Fremming. They said, "You're a blankety blank blank." And so I called timeout, and I walked over, and Frank sees me coming. He's got his arms crossed, and he sees me. He's looking back at the home plate, and he's looking back at me, and he's looking back at home. So I said, "Frank, you heard that, right?" And he just nodded. "Yeah, I heard it." Yeah. And I said, "Well, you're going to tell me who said it?" And he said, "Oh, no, I ain't doing that." I said, "Okay, then I'm going to kick you out and tell Chub Feeney you said it." He said, "You know damn good and well I didn't say that, Joe." I said, "I'm giving you a choice. You can either get kicked out or you can pick out who said it. I don't care." And he looked up and he said, "I can pick out anybody I want?" I said, "Anybody you want." He said, "Licio, you're gone." That was the trainer. He kicked out the trainer.
Too funny, man.
So now, the next day, Joe Licio's with every reporter in Dodger Stadium, both San Francisco and the Dodger press, and they're down there. And he said, "All the years I was a trainer in the major leagues, I have never been kicked out of a game. Yesterday, I left at my manager's request." So that was.
I think that was hilarious. When I heard that story, I was like, oh my God. Out of all the people, okay, the trainer's out.
Yeah, that was a classic.
Now, what's up with, what happened at the All-Star game? How come Nelson Cruz was like, hey, man, I need a picture with you? Like,
He
this
had that
right here.
he had that set up because when he came up and he said something in Spanish to Yadier Molina, and I'm going, "What's going on?" And then he hands him a phone, and Yadi turns around and he puts his arm around me, and I'm thinking, I can't even say "get the hell away from me." I got a microphone on. I can't.
Right.
So I just stood there like a dumbass. Anyway, as I look over, everybody in the American League dugout is roaring. They're laughing, and they thought it was the funniest thing they ever saw. So, but it was kind of a fun moment. I know it was for him because he sent me these big posters of it. I had to sign about 10 of them. So, yeah, that's the picture right there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I put that up just now. So, was it in 2021?
No, that was, it was years earlier.
Oh, okay.
Like 17, wasn't it? Something like that. No, 19. I forget. Anyway.
Joe, who was the biggest complainer in the batter's box as far as a batter?
Well, I got in trouble for saying this one time, but the guy that was really the funniest was Adrian Beltre. I mean, he'd be batting and the ball be right down the middle, and you call it a strike. He'd say that ball's outside, and he's kidding, you know. And when he'd play third base, the pitch would come in and bounce. He said, "Oh, it wasn't too low," you know. I mean, he's just having a good time out there.
Oh, okay. So he was messing with you.
So Bob Nightingale asked me one day. He said, "Who's the biggest complainer?" And I told the story just like I've told you, right? So it comes out in the article that I said Adrian Beltre was the biggest complainer in the big leagues. Well, Rob Manfred suspended me for it.
What for that?
Yeah, and so anyway, I said, yeah, I said it. It was in jest, but I probably shouldn't have said it. So anyway, but and I was an easy target. You know, I was president of the union, so
Right.
so that was not a smart thing to say, even though I said it in jest. And Beltray agreed with me. You know, so I saw him at a golf tournament at Pebble Beach. I said, "You got me suspended." He said, "I didn't mean to. You're the one that said it."
Which catcher would talk to you and try to be your friend?
Well, I don't think Gary Carter ever shut up. He had a running monologue. He's just the nicest guy in the world. I mean, if you ever asked him uh, to be a guest at a golf tournament, he would be there. If you asked him for any kind of charity function, he would be there. And I'll never forget. I worked the All Star game in '87, and well, to preface about talking to the umpire, Gary had two strike zones. He had one when he hit and one when he caught. So he had two different strike zones. But he was the nicest guy of all of them. It was really funny. Anyway, so he's on an elevator at the All Star game, and my wife, who's since passed away, was on the elevator with him with my mother. And where my mother got this baseball, I do not know, but she had a baseball in her purse. And she asked Gary Carter for an autograph. And he said, "Ma'am, I work for a company that has to get paid for everything that I autograph." And he went through this whole rigmarole about he didn't really want to sign it because he had a contract with somebody else just to sign baseballs and everything. So my wife, who's since passed away, said, "Let me get this straight. You don't want to sign Joe West's mother's baseball?" He said, "Ma'am, give me that ball right quick. Hurry up."
Any
So,
bets? Go ahead.
so that game, my parents are sitting in the stands on the third base side. And who's sitting behind them about 6 rows back but Joe DiMaggio? And that same wife took a baseball up to DiMaggio and asked him if he would sign a ball for Joe West, the third base umpire's parents. And he graciously signed the ball. And to my knowledge, that was the only thing he signed the whole time he was at the All-Star game.
Wow.
To Kip and Mickey West, best wishes, Joe DiMaggio.
Where is that right now?
I still have it.
Wow. That's unreal.
Yeah. So,
Wow. I mean, Joe, I'll be honest, man. It's like you had a great career, and I look at you, because I'm a huge baseball fan, and I say to myself, this guy is a nice guy. Why is everybody hating on him? I mean, it's like I have instincts. I didn't have that about Angel Hernandez. I was like, well, why is everybody burying Angel Hernandez, right? But then you defend him and say he's one of the nicest guys ever, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And as I've said many times, the media has it out for him, and that's not fair because he doesn't have the same people representing him that are writing stuff. Of course, the stuff that they write is all bogus. You look at the strike zone boxes, they say, well, he scored 84, 85. Angel Hernandez hasn't scored less than 95 the entire time he's been in the big leagues. And that's because the grading system that Major League Baseball uses isn't the same as the one these people are showing on the internet. And
Right.
I don't care which strike zone you use, but make sure it's the one the umpires know where you're grading them. Don't don't put a strike zone up there that says, "Oh, he missed 25 pitches." You know, and I've been lucky. The playoff games I worked, the All-Star games I worked at, the media has been on my side to take up for me. They said, "Oh, you only missed one pitch in that All-Star game. Oh, you only missed one pitch in this playoff game." Blah 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 blah. Well, they take one pitch and they turn the scenario around and say, "Well, nobody likes him." Well, they didn't like me either, but there were a lot of people that took up for me. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
And right now, there's nobody taking up for the umpires, and that's not fair. It's just
Joe,
not fair.
how does it work with the grading? Like, what do you mean by the grading? Like, for instance, you know how scouts talk about he's an 80 arm, he's a 70 power. How do you guys grade it?
Well, they have what's called a zone evaluation, and the umpire gets a copy of it every day after he's worked the plate. So, and they have to give it to him that quick, so he can remember the pitches that they're saying he needs to work on. And so, our system was set up so that if you got 93% right on your pitches, then you were considered to exceed standards. Well, a guy like Angel Hernandez is over 95
Consistent.
and consistently. And they had one play last year where they beat him up on a pitch that the hitter threw the bat down, threw his helmet down. He kicked the guy out of the game. And the grading system said he got the pitch absolutely right. But yet the media didn't take up for Angel. They took up for the player. And it's easy to pick on somebody when you got him down and you're kicking him. And that's wrong. He got the pitch absolutely right. And the media, in that same game, they said he missed 15% of his pitches. And his score was 96. I know because I talked to him after it was over. So that's just not fair. And the umpire today is under more scrutiny than he's ever been under in his life. I mean, I worked with Lee Wire, whose strike zone was as big as the two batters' boxes. If you got there in the air and between the dugouts, you better be swinging. And I worked with Dutch Renner, whose strike zone was just the opposite. He had a postage stamp strike zone. So those guys today, how would they grade? And these guys are considered two of the better umpires that ever lived. So the scrutiny on these guys today. Now, granted, since they started grading the umpires, I understand and I have seen it that the umpires have tightened up the strike zone. So this tougher for a guy like Tom Glavine and Maddox and Smoltz and them, they wouldn't get these pitches that you're talking about that look like to you they were a foot outside. You see what I'm saying? But then again, we had guys that had trouble adjusting to that. John Hirschbeck had trouble adjusting that because he had a bigger strike zone. But yet he worked a perfect game with Holiday. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So with coaching and teaching, he got to where they wanted you to call the pitches. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it as consistent as they can. And I think baseball is doing a good job with that. But there again, you should call the guy and say, "Hey, you did a good job." You shouldn't be like Chub Feeney was when I first started. "Oh, he called it right." "Yeah, well, that's what I pay him to do is to call him right. I don't care." And that's wrong. That's the wrong kind of attitude.
Now, a guy like Jim Joyce, right? Even though he made a mistake, did any of you umpires reach out to him, say, "Jim, to reassure him, say, look, don't worry about it, keep your head up"? Did you ever reach out to him?
Sure, we all did. I mean, Jimmy Joyce, after that game was over, and Leland had a fit over the call, was the manager. After the game was over, Leland came by the locker room and sat down with him.
Wow.
Yeah, they both smoked cigarettes,
Yeah.
Joyce and Leland, so they smoked a pack of cigarettes over this play at first base. But in fact, Jimmy Joyce is such a nice guy. He gave mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to an usher in Arizona and saved her life. And right there by the first base dugout, right? And I called him and said, "Jimmy, you saved that lady's life, and she's so grateful and everything." I said, "But you gave her lung cancer."
Here's the thing, Joe. I'm glad I ran into you with my boy Lawrence Davis. You know him, right? Character in Asheville. And when he said hi to you, and then he looked at me because I didn't recognize you because I don't know. You're in the moment. And then he's like, Eddie, that's that's Joe West. I'm like, oh shit! I ran to you, right? Do you remember that, Joe? I ran to you. I was like, yo, listen, I got a podcast. You got to come on.
Yeah, and you don't know how much this is going to cost you, do you?
Oh, shit. But it's amazing how, see, that's what I mean. People don't really know the behind the scenes with umpires. Fans don't know that. All they look at is a person that calls balls or strikes or calls whether it's foul or fair, whatever. They just make up rules, but they don't know what you guys really are. That's why I'm glad
Yeah.
I have you on my show, you know?
We had an old time umpire named Tom Gorman, and Tom Gorman made more money at speaking engagements than he ever did umpiring. He was getting $20,000 back in the 70s, which is unheard of. $20,000 today is a lot of money. He was getting it in the 70s for after dinner speeches. He was President John F. Kennedy's favorite after dinner speaker. Now, so this had to be in the 60s because Kennedy died in what, 63?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
63, 62, one of those years.
Yeah. So he gets invited to the White House after he's done a speech that Kennedy was there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so he goes home and tells his wife, go out and buy a new dress. She says, what for? He said, for your trip to the White House. She said, go pound sand, right? So she doesn't go buy a new dress. So 2 weeks later, there's a call at his house. She picks up the phone. Who's this? So-and-so from President Kennedy's office, da-da-da-da. And why are you calling me? She said, for your trip to the White House. So when Tom got home from the bar, she starts screaming at Tom. Why didn't you tell me we're going? He said, I did. I told you to go buy a new dress, remember? And so now they're arguing back and forth anyway. So now he goes to the White House. And you've seen this stuff on television, on the movies where you pull up to the gate and everything. Mm-hmm. They pull up to the gate, they wave him in. Who comes out the front steps of the White House? But John F. Kennedy. Takes him inside, takes him through the White House. Now, there's a difference between having a presidential tour with the President of the United States and a White House tour with just somebody else. So
right.
He takes them to the Oval Office. And he looks at Tom's wife and he says, is there anything you'd like to do? And she says, well, yes. And of course, when she said yes, Tom just rolled his eyes. She said, I'd like to sit in your chair. Right? So Tom goes, oh, great. So they have the press corps there taking pictures of Tom Gorman's wife, Brian Gorman's mother. Brian umpired for 25 years in the big leagues, right? Sitting in President Kennedy's chair, and they still have the picture. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that's amazing. So what's Joe West doing nowadays now besides, of course, golfing? What else?
Well, with what you're going to pay me on this podcast, I'm going to do pretty well. So.
Yeah, what are you doing now? Like, what's it like retiring? Do you miss it?
No, you know what? I hated the travel. The travel's gotten so bad. I don't even like to get on an airplane today. The travel's miserable. The passengers are ruder than I've ever seen. It used to be when you were going to take a flight, everybody was happy to get on the plane. And today, the passengers are rude. They're pushy. And today, of course, the discipline of kids today is so pathetic.
Oh,
you want to slap someone around, but
tell me about it.
But I hate what we've turned into, and I think some of it's just we don't look back at where we came from and what we're doing. So I don't like to travel. The one rule I really like that they put back in baseball is speeding up the game is that time clock. Although I think there's a kink in that where somebody could possibly get hurt, and that's when you would have a relief pitcher that's not quite ready to come in, and you've got the pitcher that you're trying to take out of the game. You've got him where he can only throw to first base 2 times before it's a balk. Because I've been in games where they would throw to first base 4 or 5 times to get the guy warmed up in the bullpen. But so I have a question about some of the realities of the new rules. Although I love the pace of the game. I think that they needed to speed that up. But I blame most of that on the Mets of the middle 80s because they started playing walk-up music, you know.
They started that first?
They were the ones that started it, yeah.
Oh, wow. I never even knew that.
Well, you don't think about it because everybody does it now. But
Right.
the point is that they shouldn't announce the guy's name till he gets in the batter's box. But they announce him, and then they play the walk-up music, and then he goes up and he has to fix this glove, and he has to fix that glove. You know? I think I told Garcia Parra one day, I said, you know, I watched Jack Nicklaus play golf. He puts that glove on when he gets out of his car, and he doesn't take it off till the match is over, and he swings a lot harder than you. Get in here. Let's go.
But did that annoy you when Garcia Parra did his batting ritual?
He was actually faster than most guys, so he really didn't complain about it. But, I mean, what is this about you know, Mark Grace never wore a batting glove.
No, he didn't.
You know? And
Jorge Posada, too. He don't wear batting gloves when he hits.
Yeah. When I was watching Ben Hogan play when I was 13 years old, and he's walking down the fairway, and this lady looked at her husband and said, he doesn't wear a glove. He doesn't wear a glove. And Hogan took his cigarette out and said, if you got to wear a glove, you're holding the club wrong. Kept right on walking. He never looked at her.
Joe, before I let you go, this is what I want to know, the schedule. Okay, so give me an example of an umpire's schedule. Let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you're in New York, Yankee Stadium, right?
Yeah.
And what time do you report at the stadium? Like, what time do you have to be at the stadium for a 7 p.m. game?
Well, you want to be there like an hour and 15 minutes before. Usually in New York, because of the traffic, you would try to be there maybe an hour and a half.
Oh, okay.
But schedule in New York, you know, we'd go to Patsy's for lunch.
Okay, so go ahead, continue.
You go to Patsy's for lunch, and then you'd work the game, and then you come back, and then you stop somewhere. Probably Smith and Walensky to see if Patty Ford or Ollie was still there. Mm-hmm. And then that would probably be late enough where you get to go back to the hotel. But yeah, you had your own little haunts. You had your own little places to go. And all
right, but hold on, Joe. Hold on. So you got to be at the game an hour and 15 minutes before the game, right? At the stadium?
Yeah.
Okay. And then let's say it's a getaway day, whether it's for the home team or the away team, but it's getaway for you guys, right? Once you finish the third game of the series, you guys got to fly out the next day and ump that night?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, there'd be times when you'd have it off day. But you know what? New York, since they put in replay, is a lot different because they try to schedule it. We tried to make it this way so that if you come to New York, you work the Yankees, the Mets, and replay. Now, that would mean you would be there for 2 weeks.
Oh, so you work in the Chelsea area, the replay?
Well, it's no longer in the Chelsea area. It's in the office of the commissioner.
Oh, so it's in the commission. Okay, so it's on Park Avenue. Oh, so your job is to be in the replay booth too?
Yeah, everybody has to go through replay. But here's the thing. Because it's in New York, that gives you actually 3 sites to work. So what they would do is let's say you come in, you work replay first. Mm-hmm. So you work replay for a week, then you work the Yankees and the Mets. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Or you work the Mets first, and then you work replay for a week, and then you work the Yankees. But you have to balance the schedule so that everybody can get in there,
right,
and get out, and get out. So it's important, and the replay system, since we put it in, and I say we, but baseball put it in, but
you're part of it.
Since we put it in, and we made sure that the umpires have to be the people making the call. They didn't want some techie or some guy that didn't umpire or didn't do this. They didn't want anybody like that making the call. Since they put that in, we created 8 new jobs. Mm. And the negotiation went like this. Rob said, I'll give you 2 umpires to work replay. And I said, Rob, 2 umpires can't watch 15 games. I said, you and I have trouble watching 1. And you want 2 guys to watch 15. I said, you can't do it. He said, what do you want? I said, I need 8. I need 1 umpire for each 2 games. And there'll be overlaps and so on. He said, I'll give you 4. I said, you'll give me 8 or you can do it yourself. And he says, okay, I'll give you 6 and 2 minor leaguers. And that's how it started. And the next contract, he gave us the other 2. But the big thing was that the players wanted to be sure that the people making the call were real umpires. So that's how we got the 8 jobs.
Joe, I never knew that in replay there's actually umpires. I never knew that. Holy shit.
When we first put it in, a lot of the guys didn't want to do it. And now, if you took away their replay assignment, they'd be mad at you.
But hold on a minute. Well, go ahead, continue. Go ahead, because I'm thinking about the West Coast games while you're in the East Coast. Are those umpires there all night?
Yep. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and usually the West Coast guys go to the guys with less seniority.
So each umpire has a game to watch. So let's say he watches the Yankees.
No, he has 2 games.
Oh, he has 2 games.
If it's a full schedule, somebody will have 1, but most guys will have 2. And as soon as you have a replay, the other game you have goes to another umpire. See what I'm saying?
Okay. But then, Joe, he could be chilling the whole time until there's a replay called for, right? Right? He could just be hanging out. He don't really have to pay attention to the whole game, right? It's just like...
Well, he should, but yeah, he doesn't have that responsibility that he has to watch every pitch, no.
Right.
And here's the other thing. He doesn't get the feed from the announcers. He just gets the video.
Oh, just the video.
You don't hear what. Sometimes you have to go back and try to figure out what happened for them to, like if they have a beanball situation, which you wouldn't rule on anyway, because you can't tell them what happened. They have to do that on the field. But the replay stuff, and sometimes you'll ask a question of the umpire that's on replay. Why did you call him out? And he'll say, well, he was out of the baseline. Well, then that's out of the replay purview. So that's not reviewable. So there'll be stuff that will come up. And if there's ever a ruling where somebody's going to protest the game, it goes to replay. People read the rule out of the book, be sure before the umpires make a decision, it's the correct ruling and stuff like that. So the replay has been a very good thing for baseball. And it made them a lot of money in advertising, and it's one of those things that baseball didn't go with it. So
I agree with replay because I say to myself, if the umpire is off a little bit, it's okay. It's fine. That's what the replay is there for. It's to confirm whether he was right or he was wrong. Doesn't mean he's a bad umpire.
That was the hardest thing to get umpires to accept, that the umpire in replay was a member of your crew at the time. He's helping you get everything right. He's not there to hurt you. He's there to help you. He's there to make sure that you get everything exactly right.
Right. Like me giving you a credit card, American Express, and let's see if I authorize if it goes through. Same thing.
Yeah.
You got that extra witness to help you out just in case. But then again, Joe, without the replays, if umpires had a bad grading system, can you demote them and say, well, now you're going to AAA like a ball player?
Well, yeah, there's portions of the contract that establish the rights that the office has disciplining an umpire. But let me tell you this, we have the best umpires, the sport in the world at what we do. They're not going to hire somebody that they're going to have to send down.
Right.
That's a mistake on their part. You should never be hiring somebody who's not going to be able to do the job. And when they say this umpire is a bad umpire, this guy's a good umpire, you know what? You're only as good as the last play you had. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the greatest umpire that ever lived. If you missed the last pitch or the last play, then you're the worst. You're only as good as your last call. Somebody asked me one day, he says, what's your toughest call? I said, your next one. That's the toughest.
Well, also with the player, you're only good as your last at bat.
Well, and they don't look at it that way either.
Because, for instance, as much I couldn't stand A-Rod in October. He just couldn't come through except that 1 year. But I'm like, come on, you hit 40 to 50 home runs during the season, and October comes, you're choking. I mean, I remember Joe Girardi pinch hit for his ass one time. I was like, what?
See, Joe Girardi made this interview more than you did.
So like, but do you, Joe? Do you feel sometimes with hitters like you're thinking this guy's gonna choke, he's not gonna come through? Do you have that? Do you have those thoughts in your mind?
No,
No.
because I've seen enough baseball where I know that sometimes the least likely candidate can drive in the run. You
Yeah.
know, um, the uh, the White Sox had a catcher named AJ Brzezinski,
Hmm.
who most times had trouble hitting water if he fell out of a boat. But when the game was on the line, the guy's on second base and you needed a clutch hit, he'd come through with it. Billy Russell was a shortstop for the Dodgers for years, choked up about 3 inches on the bat, and he'd come to bat and the game's on the line, the runner's on third, he'd get a hit. He was a great clutch hitter.
Yeah.
And then and so you never, I mean, this guy was not known for his hitting. He was known for his fielding and his defensive play. I mean, and he'd drive in a run. There's Ted Simmons was a tough out. Of course, he just went in the Hall of Fame, so it's
Hmm.
hard to say that he was an unlikely guy to drive in a run. Ted Simmons was one of the greatest hitters you ever saw, and he hit from both sides of the plate. Uh, Again, you got guys like Pujols. Why would you pitch to a guy like Pujols? I mean, if there's a
Right.
base open, you're not going to pitch to him, you know. And Greg Maddox said, when I pitched to Barry Bonds, I didn't throw him a strike. I said, how'd you get him out? I said, I didn't throw him a strike. You know, so just the crazy things about what goes on out there. This is the greatest sport in the world, and it's defined by your success, which is supposed to outweigh your failures. Well, look at the game. If you fail 7 out of 10 times, you're going to the Hall of Fame. Think about that.
Yeah.
You batted 300. Well, I made 70% of the time I made outs, and yet that's good enough to go to the Hall of Fame. Well, damn right it is. You
Yeah.
know,
But you know, if
and
a quarterback does that on a Sunday, 3 out of 10, he has to find another job.
yeah, that's right. I mean, you can't. I watched a golf tournament yesterday, and they talked about how bad McElroy and Scheffler putted. The guy that beat him had to shoot 61 on the back nine, or on the whole day. He shot 28 on the back nine. He shot 61 for the day, and all they could talk about was how bad McElroy and Scheffler putted. Well, one of them shot 66, and the other one shot 65, and they still lost.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how difficult this job is. And you know what? You can say the hitters, the pitchers. The guy said, "You ever seen a perfect game?" I said, "No, I've never seen a pitcher throw 100% strikes." Well, that's not a perfect game. No, but I've never seen a pitcher throw 100% strikes, and I've never seen a hitter bat 1,000. You know, so it's a game of failures. And if your successes are more than your failures, then you got a good chance of being very successful in what you do.
Yeah.
Now, umpiring is completely different because you can get 100% of your pitches right and still get yelled at.
They still bury your ass, huh? Joe.
John Montefiusco, one day he says, I wish I had your job. Said, you show up just before the game and you walk out on the field. And I says, yeah. But if you had a bad first inning, they take you out. If I have a bad first inning, they yell at me for 9 more.
Joe, what about, have you ever been involved? The biggest brawl. What do you do in that situation? You get your card and you're right, number 32 gone, number 11 gone. What do you do?
Yeah. Well, if you can break it up early, you try to break it up. If you can't, you need to step back and get out of the way because you're not going to see everything. I've been in enough. I had a brawl with the Mets and the Phillies, and I had to pull a guy out of a pile because he was trying to rip a guy in half. And when I did, he took a swing at me. He didn't see me because I was behind him, pulled him out. And when he took his swing at me, I just let him go. And he went head over tea kettle. And they made a big deal about me throwing the guy down. So the Players Association asked him to file a grievance against me. His name was Dennis Cook. And Dennis says, "You want me to file a grievance against an umpire? I'm a pitcher, you morons. I'm not filing a grievance against an umpire."
Yeah, because Joe, that's really hard to do, right? Like, what do you do? Like, you got to get out of the way, right? Let them go at it.
Well, it's really funny. We used to talk to Gus Heffling about breaking up fights. Gus was the fitness guy for the Phillies. He was a Taekwondo guy. And he went to the Phillies because of Roman Gabriel. He was Roman Gabriel's personal trainer when Roman left the Rams to go play for the Eagles. And when Ruly Carpenter saw what he did for Roman, he hired Gus to train his players like Carlton and Dalton and all those guys as a fitness guru, which he was great. He was an unbelievable fitness guy. Anyway, so I asked him one day, I says, we got two players fighting. How do you break them up? Because he's a Taekwondo guy. He said, you get a running start and you kick one of them in the back. I went, I can't do that, Gus. This is a baseball game. He said, well, you asked me. That's how you do it. So it's difficult. There are times you can break it up right away and get them separated. I think the biggest thing you do is you get rid of the aggressor, and the guy, like there's going to be two people fighting. Well, if they both want to fight, they're going to fight, and if you can get the aggressor and move him away, then that's about all you can do, because one umpire can't handle two players. So how do you expect four umpires to handle 50? You can't do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, listen, Joe, you've been amazing, man. Holy shit. Thank God. Thank God you didn't big league me. I was a little worried. This guy. Is there such a thing as a Hall of Fame umpires? Do you have a Hall of Fame thing going on?
I think there's 10 of them.
10 of them. Okay.
Yeah.
I think you're next, buddy. What, 3 more years?
I don't know if well, once you're 65, I think you can go in whenever the Veterans Committee picks you. But I don't look forward to that, because I have nothing to do with it. I can't I can't even talk about it, because it's a humbling experience just to be in.
Yeah, Joe, you and I know you're making it, Joe. You and I know.
Well, you're very kind. I appreciate it.
And when you do make it, make sure you say this guy named Eddie Mata said so in 2023. Then I'll make the Hall of Fame as an umpire. You'll see.
Well, I just want to see you at the next golf tournament in Nashville. So I'll see you.
We're gonna do a lot of stuff in Nashville this fall coming up, especially with the Titans, because John and Lawrence do so much shit out there. So I don't know. I'll keep in touch with you.
Stay in touch.
Yeah,